Hey guys, it's Madison Estes. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the horror manga The Liminal Zone by Junji Ito. So the first story I want to talk about is The Weeping Woman. It's about a couple that visits a village and they encounter a weeping woman. This is a professional mourner that is hired at a funeral to cry. For some reason the encounter makes the girlfriend Mako start crying as well, and whenever they get back home she can't stop crying. Like, she has a very severe depression, she cries every day, she doesn't understand what's wrong. So they go back to the village to try to figure out what's going on. And when they go back they end up encountering an entire village of weeping women, and it turns out that there's more going on, that there appears to be some kind of supernatural forces at work. I don't want to get into any more details, but I do want to say that this ending was very beautiful, kind of sad, but I really enjoyed it a lot, and I thought this was a great opening to the collection. The next story is Madonna, which is probably one of my favorite stories I've read by Junji Ito so far. At this point I've read several of his collections, and this one is probably my favorite. The story is about a girl that ends up going to a very religious school, and the principal is a pervert, and he kind of starts hitting on her, and you can tell that he's grooming her. And you end up finding out that, his wife, who is, physically very unattractive, but she was once quite pretty, he had also kind of groomed her as well, to replace his last wife, who was also very unattractive. And it kind of seems as though being with this man is what makes these women that way. It seems to make them unattractive, I guess, because they're so bitter at being misused. I think that's what the author's going for. So he obviously mistreats his wives, and his current wife, who is very intimidating and kind of takes out her frustration on the girls. She ends up being sort of having a supernatural power that she uses to abuse some of the girls at the school, and so the girl who ends up being targeted by the principal also ends up being targeted by the principal's wife because she's jealous. But then at the end it kind of turns around a little bit, and it feels very vindicating. It's a really good ending. It's a very satisfying story, but also very deeply disturbing on many levels. And the ending isn't all sunshines and rainbow. Even though I felt like it was a vindicating story, it's still a pretty depressing ending, but I enjoyed it a lot, and it's one of my favorite stories. The next story is The Spirit Flow of Aokigahara. Bear with me, I'm pronouncing that the best I can. This story is about a couple that goes to a suicide forest because he is terminally ill and in a lot of pain, and she doesn't want to live without him. So the stakes are already very high in this story. The only criticism I have with this story is that it's not super spooky, and also I felt like because the stakes were so high, it's really hard to have more tension because these characters are already marked for death. Voluntarily, they're marked for death. So it's really hard to threaten them in a way that feels scary, because they're already goners in your mind. So I kind of thought that it was going to be a supernatural afterlife story, that they were killing themselves thinking they were going to enter a nothingness void, but it turns out they go straight to hell, or something like that, or some creature from hell's trying to drag them to hell and they're trying to escape and they decide not to kill themselves because they don't want to go to hell, or something like that. That could have been a really good story. Maybe I'll write that story someday. But this wasn't like that. They end up finding sort of a loophole, and it changes their body, but it seems as though the sick boyfriend is able to live because of this thing that they find. And it doesn't seem to have any negative repercussions throughout the whole story. I kept waiting for that. I'm like, well, is it making him evil? Is it, sucking the power of everyone around him to make him healthy again? It doesn't seem to have any drawbacks, so I'm not even sure this is really a horror story. It seems like it's kind of a sci-fi story to me. And it was still good. It was weird. I wasn't super satisfied with the ending, although I did like the idea and I enjoyed the story overall, just because it was so different from anything else I've read. There was some weird sexual undertones where he's flirting with another guy right in front of her, and I was like, okay, unless you're trying to start a threesome, this is really rude. You shouldn't do that in front of your girlfriend. And it didn't seem like he was trying to start a threesome, so I don't know what his deal was. I wasn't thrilled with it. It was my least favorite in the collection, and it's, it's worth reading, just don't get your hopes up for that one. The last story in this collection is called Slumber. It's about a guy who goes to sleep and he has dreams of murdering people, and then he sees that those people have been murdered on the news, and he begins to suspect that he has a split personality and that he's going around killing people in the middle of the night whenever he goes to sleep. I thought this was a really interesting twist on the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde concept. He spends a lot of the story trying to figure out if he even is the killer. You know, he's like, well, the killer was spotted wearing a parka. How could I have forgotten that I bought a parka recently? So there's definitely some psychological horror going on where we don't know what's real. The character's a very unreliable narrator. And then his girlfriend comes in and she kind of talks some sense into him, and she's like, you know, I don't think you're the killer because it just isn't who you are. And then she says, let's put some cameras up and see if you get up in the middle of the night and kill someone. Leave it to the girlfriend to come in and bring logic to the situation and immediately come up with a very simple solution for proving whether or not he's a killer. After she leaves, the climax of the story happens, and then the ending, which I don't want to spoil for you, but it's really interesting and it's definitely not what I expected. I was thinking it was probably going to be like a split personality thing, even though I should have had more faith in Junji Ito and known he wasn't going to do something that cliche, but that is definitely what I was thinking, and it had a different twist and it was very interesting to me, and I enjoyed this one quite a bit. And it also had a second twist at the very end on the last page, and I just love that. I love even whenever I can see it coming when there's like a second twist at the very end, as long as it feels earned, and in this case it did feel earned and I enjoyed it a lot. So that's it for my review of the Liminal Zone. This is definitely one of Junji Ito's shorter collections, but I feel as though all of the stories are good. In fact, I think 3 of the stories are great. And, you know, aside from the ending of that one story, which isn't terrible, it's just kind of to me, I definitely feel as though this anthology is worth your time. Kind of hard for me to rate this because I feel like 3 out of the 4 stories were 5 out of 5. And like one of the stories was kind of like a 3.5 out of 5, maybe a 4. I don't feel like grabbing my calculator to do the math, so I'm just going to give this book 4.5 out of 5 stars. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe. On this channel, I post reviews, writing advice, horror commentary, and vlogs. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you later.